There's a kind of love that doesn't ask for permission, just shows up when the heart is tired and stays when everything else leaves. I never expected anything to arrive at my door again, not after all the years of waiting for someone to choose me and staying silent when no one did. The world doesn't tell you what to do with a woman's heart when it's been quiet for too long. It doesn't prepare you for the ache that comes from being looked through, day after day, like your soul has expired. You just carry on wearing years like heavy wool, no longer searching, no longer expecting to be seen. And then he was there. It wasn't some grand entrance, just a soft knock, a favor, a helping hand with the garden. A kind smile from the boy who once rode his bike past my window and waved like he was reaching out to someone who mattered. He was 23, I was 55. I laughed inside the first few times we spoke. Not because I thought it was funny, but because I didn't know where to put the warmth in his eyes. I didn't know how to hold something that wasn't asking anything from me except to just be there. He'd come by after his evening shifts, covered in sawdust, smelling like sweat and new beginnings. I'd make tea, he'd sit with me like time didn't exist, and slowly I realized he wasn't looking at the woman I used to be. He wasn't imagining some younger version of me. He was right here, with the tired eyes, the scars I no longer covered, the voice I'd learned to quiet. We didn't rush. It wasn't hunger that built between us. It was presence, real, steady, unwavering presence. He listened to stories I hadn't told in years. He looked at me like each wrinkle had a name, like every tired breath I took was sacred. I remember the first time he touched me, not in some rushed or reckless way, but gently, like he was reading a prayer he wasn't sure he was allowed to say out loud. I had just come in from the rain, soaked through, hair stuck to my face, shivering in the quiet. He reached up and tucked a strand behind my ear. His hand lingered for a moment, resting on my cheek. I didn't pull away. I didn't know how to. I think my heart had been waiting for something like that for years. Something that didn't demand, didn't chase, didn't pretend. He didn't kiss me that night. He just held my face and looked at me like I wasn't invisible anymore. The first time we were truly together, I didn't plan it. I didn't prepare. There was no script, no intention. Just the two of us, sitting too close on the couch, silence thick between us, the kind that holds everything words can't reach. He touched my hand first, then my wrist, and I let him. When he leaned in, there was no hunger in it, only reverence. He kissed me like he was afraid I'd disappear, like he knew my body was something that hadn't been worshipped in a long time, and he wanted to learn how to do it slowly. We didn't rush. He undressed me like every piece of clothing told a story. My blouse, my bra, even the lines along my stomach that I'd always tried to hide. He kissed each one with care, like he wanted to make them feel seen again. When he entered me, I cried, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. Because for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, my body wasn't being used or pitied or ignored. It was being chosen, and not for youth or perfection, but for presence, for the simple fact that I was still here. His hands never left my skin. His mouth found every place I had forgotten could still feel. He moved slowly, deeply, never breaking eye contact. And in that moment, it wasn't about pleasure. It was about healing. It was about saying, you still matter. You still have a heart worth touching. We stayed like that for hours, wrapped in stillness, breath sinking, our bodies speaking in a language far older than shame. He held me afterward like I was the most fragile thing in the world, and yet the strongest. We didn't talk much that night. There were no confessions, no questions about what we were. But in the silence, I heard everything I needed to hear. He came back the next day, and the next, sometimes just to hold me, sometimes just to laugh, sometimes just to remind me that someone saw me in a world that had long since passed me by. He didn't fix my life. He didn't take away the years I had lost, but he gave me something else. He gave me space to exist fully, without apology. And that's the kind of love that doesn't ask for permission. It just shows up. It waits with you. It touches you without taking, and it stays, even when everything else has already gone. Sometimes the one who holds you last isn't the one you expected, but the one who sees every scar without needing an explanation. I wasn't looking for love anymore. I had put it away, neatly folded and placed at the back of my soul like an old dress that no longer fit the woman I had become. There's a silence that grows inside you when you've spent too many years being touched without being felt, kissed without being seen, needed but never truly wanted. I had made peace with that quiet, or so I thought. He came into my life like a soft breath, unannounced, unassuming. A friend's son home from college, helping around the house after I hurt my back. 23, tall, thoughtful, and carrying the kind of gentleness that life hadn't yet hardened. He didn't stare at me the way some men do when they see a woman older than they expect to desire. He looked at me like I was something already familiar, not shocking or shameful, just real. The first time he asked me how I was, I lied. I said I was fine. He looked at me and simply nodded, but something in his eyes told me he heard the truth anyway. He didn't press. He stayed late, fixing a door that didn't need fixing, lingering in conversation that drifted from books to fears to memories. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere between passing him coffee and watching him laugh at the ridiculous way my dog snored, something cracked open in me. He never asked about my past. He didn't flinch at the sadness in my voice or the tired weight behind my laughter. He didn't need explanations. That's what made him different. He just stayed. One night, as I was closing up the kitchen, he walked in from the porch and just looked at me. No words, no sudden move, just the kind of gaze that reaches further than skin. I looked away, but he stepped closer. His hand touched my cheek, rough from work, warm from holding stillness. I froze, not in fear, but in disbelief. "You're beautiful," he said, not as a compliment, not like someone trying to awaken something. He said it like a truth he had carried in him for weeks, waiting for the right moment to release it. I didn't kiss him. I let him kiss me, and when he did, it was the softest thing I'd ever felt. He didn't grab or pull. He just rested his lips against mine like he was asking for permission to stay, and I let him. That night, my body didn't hide. I didn't shrink away from the light. I didn't worry about the shape of my stomach, the texture of my thighs, the age in my skin. I watched him watch me undress, slowly, with awe, not hunger. Reverence. He touched me like every inch of me was worthy of being held, not just the places men usually want. His hands were tender, his breath warm against my collarbone as he kissed the places I forgot could still respond. I had forgotten what it felt like to be chosen slowly, to be made love to without shame or rush. He moved with patience, his lips tracing lines along my chest, his fingers memorizing the stories my skin carried. When he entered me, he didn't thrust. He breathed with me, letting our bodies find each other without force. His eyes stayed on mine. He whispered nothing, just silence and the sound of being fully, deeply seen. After, he didn't let go. He stayed wrapped around me, his chest against my back, his hand resting lightly on my ribs. I cried, not from sadness, not from regret, but from relief. Because somewhere deep inside, I realized that all those years of being half, held, half loved had finally found their answer, in the arms of someone I never expected. He didn't ask what the tears were for. He just kissed my shoulder and held me tighter. In the days that followed, he didn't change. He didn't turn distant or awkward. He didn't treat it like a mistake or a secret. He came back with groceries, with questions about my day, with that same gaze that never once looked away from who I really was. It wasn't about our ages. It wasn't about what made sense. It was about something raw and honest, something that healed in places I thought were unreachable. Sometimes the one who holds you last isn't the one who fit the plan. but they see you, every scar, every story, and they love you not despite it, but because of it. Real love doesn't knock loud. It slips in slowly, touches your soul gently, and makes you feel safe for the first time in forever. He didn't come into my life with fireworks or grand gestures. There were no declarations, no chasing, just a slow unfolding, a quiet presence, the kind you don't notice at first, not because it isn't beautiful, but because it doesn't demand to be seen. It was morning coffee. It was shared silence. It was the way he listened, fully, like there was nowhere else he needed to be. He started as someone familiar, a neighbor, a kind young man I'd known since he was a boy, now 23, and helping his parents around the house after school. Our conversations began with the weather, then slipped into deeper things without us even trying. There was never a moment where it suddenly became romantic. It wasn't that kind of love. It grew like ivy, quiet and steady, wrapping around the places in me I thought had long turned to stone. One morning, he showed up early, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. I was still in my robe, hair undone, sleep still on my face. I apologized out of habit, embarrassed, but he just smiled and said, "You look peaceful like this." And somehow, that felt more intimate than anything anyone had said to me in years. He didn't flirt, he didn't try, he just kept showing up. He'd sit with me while the sun came up. No words, just sips of coffee and the sound of the day beginning. And I started to feel something I hadn't felt in so long. Safe, not protected, not guarded, just safe, like I could be fully myself and nothing bad would happen. It wasn't desire that came first. It was warmth, a gentle curiosity, and slowly my body started to remember what it felt like to be seen, not craved, not used, just seen. One evening, we were watching the sky darken through the kitchen window, his arm resting on the table, his fingers inches from mine. The silence between us had become its own language. I looked at him, and he looked back. There was no question in his eyes, just patience. I reached out and placed my hand on his. He turned his palm and closed his fingers around mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. No rush, no urgency, just touch. That night he stayed. He didn't ask to. He didn't need to. We moved through the house like we'd done it before, like our bodies already knew where to go. He kissed me in the hallway, one hand on my waist, the other cradling the back of my neck. It was soft, slow, almost hesitant, like he wanted to make sure I didn't disappear. I kissed him back, fully. Finally, when we made love, it didn't feel like an act. It felt like a conversation. His hands moved over me with such care, as if he was trying to memorize every part of me. He didn't avoid the places I usually covered. He didn't skip over the softness, the stretch marks, the evidence of time. He lingered on them, kissed them, let his hands rest there like he was thanking them for still being here. He undressed me slowly, letting each layer fall to the floor with the weight of years I had carried alone. I let him see everything, and in his eyes there was no judgment, no pity, just quiet wonder. Like he was honored to be allowed in, we didn't rush, he didn't push. He took his time, tracing my ribs, pressing his lips to my stomach, breathing against my skin like he was settling into something sacred. And when he entered me, it wasn't with hunger, it was with reverence. We moved together like we had nowhere else to be, like the world had stopped outside that room, and all that mattered was breath and warmth and feeling. There was no performance, no trying to impress, just truth, just presence. Afterward, he held me. We said nothing. His hand rested on my chest, just above my heart, as if to say, "I'm here, I'm not leaving," and he didn't. The next morning, he made coffee. He handed me a cup with that same calm smile. We sat at the kitchen table in silence again, just like we always had, but now everything was different, everything was open. That's how it stayed between us, simple, steady. He never asked me to be younger or different or less of what I'd become. He loved the quiet in me. He loved the stillness, the softness, the strength I had to rebuild. And I learned that love doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to arrive with promises. Sometimes real love is just the warmth of a hand on yours, a kiss on the shoulder at sunrise, the kind of sex that heals instead of takes, the kind of presence that says, "You're safe now, you're safe to feel, safe to be held, safe to stay." And that kind of love doesn't fade. It settles into your bones. The deepest love is when someone sits with your silence, kisses your wounds without asking how they got there, and makes you believe you're still wanted. He never asked why I seemed so tired when I smiled. He never asked why I paused before answering simple questions, or why sometimes my gaze drifted too long toward a window, lost in something I no longer had the strength to explain. He didn't ask because he didn't need to. He just sat beside me in the quiet, unmoving, unshaken, like the silence itself was enough for him. He was young, but his heart didn't move with haste. It moved with something older, something calmer. When he spoke, it was never to fill the space, but to soften it. When he touched me, it wasn't to claim me, but to comfort what no one else saw. I had forgotten what it felt like to be wanted without performance, to be desired not despite the years that shaped me, but because of them. The night it shifted between us, the rain had been falling for hours. He had come over after work, drenched, his hair clinging to his forehead. I handed him a towel, and he dried himself in the doorway, laughing as the storm poured behind him. I watched him, my chest aching in a way I hadn't felt in so long. And before I could talk myself out of it, I reached for his hand. I didn't say a word, I just held it, and he squeezed back, nothing more, just warmth passing from one life to another, from someone who had been waiting too long to someone who didn't know they were needed yet. Later he followed me into the kitchen. The lights were low, my robe was thin, and when he brushed his fingers down my spine, I felt every nerve in my body wake up after years of sleeping. I turned toward him, and for a moment we just stood there. His eyes studied my face, then drifted down to my neck, my shoulders, the curve of my waist. But there was no hunger in his gaze, only reverence. He leaned in slowly, as if afraid I might disappear. And when he kissed me, it was not a claiming, it was an offering. I didn't pull away, I didn't hide. I pressed into him, into the warmth of his mouth, into the promise that I didn't have to explain my loneliness anymore. He touched me like he had all the time in the world. Like the lines on my skin were stories he wanted to learn. I felt him untying my robe, the silk falling to the floor, and for the first time in years, I didn't flinch. I didn't shield myself. I let him look. Let him take in every mark, every sag, every part of me time had softened. He kissed my collarbone, then my chest, then lower, so slowly I thought I'd melt. His hands found the sides of my hips, the inside of my thighs. And when he touched me there, it wasn't with urgency, it was with knowing, as if he understood I'd been waiting to feel something real for far too long. He laid me down gently, his body against mine. His breath was steady. His eyes never left mine, and when he entered me, I didn't gasp from surprise. I exhaled from relief. He moved inside me with care, not rhythm. He stayed present, grounded. He let me guide the pace, let my body tell him what it needed. And I needed to be loved, not taken, not consumed, loved. We moved together slowly, hands locked, foreheads touching, lips brushing with every thrust. There was no space between us, not even in the silence. He whispered nothing. He didn't need to. His body told me everything, that he saw me, that he wasn't afraid of my past, that he wanted all of it. After, we lay tangled in each other. His hand stroked my arm, back and forth, like he was soothing something deep beneath my skin. And I cried not from sorrow, but from softness. I hadn't known I could still feel this safe, this wanted. He didn't ask why. He kissed my forehead, held me tighter, let my tears fall onto his chest without moving. The next morning, he made me breakfast, hummed a song I didn't know while scrambling eggs in my old kitchen. He kissed me like nothing had changed, because everything had, but in a way that didn't need words. He stayed, he kept showing up in every silence, every touch, every small act of care that said, "You're not alone anymore." That's what the deepest love looks like, not loud, not chasing youth, but honoring pain, holding memory and staying anyway,